The problem with marrying your best friend as a joke is that everyone laughs except the person who has been in love with him for 12 years. That was the first sentence that came to Ethan Miller's mind when he woke up on Noah Bennett's couch with a wool blanket tangled around his legs, one sock missing, and a silver ring sitting heavy on the fourth finger of his left hand. For a few seconds, he did not move. He stared at the ceiling fan turning slowly above him, listening to the familiar sounds of Noah's little house by the lake waking up around him. The old heater clicking in the hallway, the coffee maker sputtering in the kitchen, the soft scrape of cabinet doors opening and closing. It should have felt like any other Sunday morning after a long night helping at one of Willow Creek's charity events. Ethan had slept on this couch 100 times before. He knew the dip in the middle cushion, the faded quilt Noah's mother had made in college, the way morning light slipped through the pine trees and painted gold lines across the hardwood floor. But this morning, everything felt wrong because of the ring. He lifted his hand slowly, as if the movement might make it disappear. It did not. The band was plain silver, a little scratched, warm from his skin, and just loose enough to turn when he touched it with his thumb. Ethan remembered laughter. He remembered string lights over the town hall gym, paper flowers taped to folding chairs, Mrs. Harper from the bakery selling cupcakes for the library roof fund, and Noah standing beside him in a flannel shirt with his sleeves rolled up, grinning like the whole world was something he could fix with 2 jokes and a hammer. He remembered the wedding booth, too, the silly fundraiser where couples paid $10 to get married by Judge Whittaker, who had retired 5 years ago but still owned 3 suits and a voice serious enough to make a parking ticket sound biblical. It was supposed to be harmless. Fake vows, fake applause, fake rings from a little velvet tray. Then Noah had grabbed Ethan's hand in front of half the town and said, bright and easy, "Come on. If I ever had to marry someone, it'd be you." Everyone had laughed. Ethan had laughed too, because that was what he was good at. He had spent years turning heartbreak into punchlines before anyone could notice the bruise underneath. The smell of coffee drifted closer, and Noah appeared in the doorway with his hair sticking up in the back, wearing gray sweatpants and an old Vermont State hoodie with sawdust still clinging to one sleeve. He held 2 mugs, one black for himself and one with too much cream for Ethan, exactly the way Ethan liked it. His smile was sleepy, warm, completely unaware of the earthquake happening inside Ethan's chest. "Morning, husband," Noah said, and the word landed so gently it almost hurt more. Ethan forced his face to do what it always did for Noah. He smiled. "Morning, mistake." Noah laughed and crossed the room, handing him the mug before dropping into the armchair across from him. "Okay, before you panic, my mom has already texted me 14 heart emojis. My sister wants to know if she can plan the reception, and Mr. Dalton from the hardware store said he always knew we had chemistry, which is deeply disturbing because Mr. Dalton also thinks sanding without goggles is a personality trait." Ethan wrapped both hands around the mug to hide the tremor in his fingers. "Please tell me the whole town did not see the photos." "The whole town saw the photos," Noah said cheerfully. "Possibly the county. Maybe Vermont. You looked very handsome, by the way. Very tragic little groom energy." Ethan took a sip of coffee and looked away toward the kitchen window, where the lake beyond the trees was pale and still under the October sky. "Great. That is exactly the brand I've been building." Noah leaned forward, elbows on his knees, still smiling. "Relax. We'll fix it Monday." Ethan's breath paused. "Fix it?" "Yeah." Judge Whittaker said there might have been some mix-up with the paperwork because the real couples and the fake couples were on the same clipboard, which, honestly, feels like a very Willow Creek disaster. "I'll call the county clerk first thing tomorrow. We'll get it canceled or annulled or whatever the grown-up word is." He said it kindly, casually, like they had accidentally subscribed to a magazine. Like Ethan's heart had not been sitting in his throat since the moment he saw the certificate on the coffee table. Ethan looked at it now. The paper was real enough to make him cold. Their names were printed side by side in clean black ink. Noah James Bennett and Ethan Daniel Miller. Beneath them sat a seal, a signature, and a date Ethan knew he would remember for the rest of his life, even if Noah forgot it by lunch. "Right," Ethan said. "Monday." Noah tilted his head. "You okay?" That was the dangerous thing about Noah. He noticed everything except the one thing Ethan had spent 12 years trying not to show him. He noticed when Ethan skipped breakfast, when he overworked, when his voice went quiet after a call from his father, when he pretended not to be tired. Noah could identify a loose stare by sound from across a room, but somehow he had never heard the way Ethan's heart broke a little every time he called him his best friend. "I'm fine," Ethan said, because it was the oldest lie he owned. Noah studied him for another second, then glanced at Ethan's hand and grinned. "You're still wearing it." Ethan looked down too quickly. "It got stuck." "On your tiny artist fingers?" "I have normal fingers. You have Victorian ghost fingers." Ethan rolled his eyes, but his thumb betrayed him, brushing once more over the ring. Noah's smile softened in that thoughtless, affectionate way that always made Ethan want impossible things. Then he stood and headed back toward the kitchen. "I'll make pancakes. Accidental husbands deserve pancakes." When Noah disappeared, Ethan set the coffee down and carefully slid the ring off. It did not stick. It came free easily, silently, like it had been waiting for him to admit the truth. He expected to see cheap plastic, something light from the charity tray. Instead, inside the band, worn almost smooth with age, were two tiny engraved initials. MB to EB, 1964. Ethan's stomach dropped. He knew those initials. Margaret and Edward Bennett, Noah's grandparents. The couple whose wedding photo still sat on Noah's mantle. The couple Noah always spoke about like they had invented love itself. Ethan closed his fingers around the ring as footsteps sounded in the kitchen and Noah hummed off-key over the pancake batter, utterly unaware that the joke had just become something Ethan could not laugh at anymore. Noah made pancakes the way he did almost everything, with too much confidence and not enough attention to the mess he left behind. Flour dusted the counter like fresh snow, maple syrup warmed in a small saucepan, and the first pancake came out shaped less like a circle and more like the state of Kentucky after a long day. Ethan sat at the kitchen island with the old silver ring hidden inside his closed fist, watching Noah move around the kitchen in bare feet, humming the same 3 lines of an old country song he never remembered correctly. This was the kind of morning Ethan had taught himself not to want too much. Sunlight through pine branches. Coffee gone lukewarm beside his elbow. Noah laughing at his own terrible breakfast. A house that smelled like butter and wood smoke and the cedar shavings Noah always carried home from the workshop. It looked so much like a life that Ethan had to remind himself it was only a pause before Monday. Only a mistake waiting to be corrected. Only another story they would tell someday when everyone else had forgotten how it felt to him. "You are quiet," Noah said, flipping the second pancake with a spatula and almost losing it to the floor. "That usually means you are either judging me or designing an entire children's book in your head." Ethan loosened his grip on the ring before the edges pressed marks into his palm. "Maybe both." Harsh but fair. Noah slid a plate toward him. "Eat." You get philosophical when your blood sugar drops. That was Noah too. Always noticing the practical things. Always placing food in front of Ethan before asking harder questions. Ethan cut into the pancake and tried to swallow around the ache in his throat. 12 years ago, he had met Noah Bennett in a college theater workshop Ethan only took because the painting studio was full and he needed an elective. Ethan had been 19, too thin from stress, wearing thrift store sweaters and carrying a sketchbook like a shield. Noah had been 20, broad-shouldered, loud in the easiest way, with sawdust under his nails because he spent mornings apprenticing at a cabinet shop and evenings building sets for extra credit. Their first conversation happened because Ethan had been trying to paint a fake window onto plywood, and Noah had walked over, squinted at it, and said, "That is either a window or the saddest toaster I have ever seen." Ethan had laughed before he could stop himself. It was the first time he had laughed that week. After that, Noah kept appearing. Beside him during late-night set builds with vending machine coffee. Outside his dorm during a snowstorm, holding a toolbox because Ethan's desk drawer had jammed and he had mentioned it once. In the emergency room at 2 in the morning when Ethan's fever spiked during finals and Noah drove 32 miles because the campus clinic was closed. Noah stayed. That was the thing Ethan had never known how to defend himself against. People like Noah because he was warm, because he could make a room feel less lonely, because he remembered birthdays and changed flat tires and called his mother every Sunday. Ethan loved him because Noah never made staying look heroic. He simply did it, as naturally as breathing. Once, during senior year, Ethan had fallen asleep at the library with his cheek pressed against an open art history book. When he woke, Noah's jacket was over his shoulders and a paper cup of tea sat beside his hand with a note that said, "You looked cold, Van Gogh." Ethan still had that note. He had kept it in the back pocket of a sketchbook, the same sketchbook where he had drawn Noah so many times the pages had begun to feel like a confession. Noah sanding a chair in golden afternoon light. Noah leaning over a truck engine with his brow furrowed. Noah asleep on Ethan's tiny apartment floor after helping him move, one arm thrown over his face, mouth slightly open, completely unguarded. Ethan had told himself artists studied people. Artists noticed hands, posture, light. Artists could draw their best friends without turning it into a tragedy. But somewhere between the jacket, the tea, the hospital drive, and the way Noah once told him, "You are the brother I actually chose." Ethan's heart had stepped over a line his mouth never would. That sentence had been a gift and a wound in the same breath. Brother. Chosen. Safe. Impossible. Earth to Ethan, Noah said, waving the spatula gently in front of him. You just stared at that pancake like it owed you money. Ethan blinked himself back into the kitchen. I was thinking. Dangerous hobby. You should try it sometime. Noah gasped. In my own home. By my own husband. The words slipped out with another grin, casual and careless, and Ethan felt his fingers close around the ring again beneath the counter. Noah did not mean it. Ethan knew that. Noah had dated women. Noah had spoken about future wives with the vague optimism of a man who assumed love would arrive in a shape he recognized. Noah had never looked at Ethan and seen a possibility. He had seen comfort, loyalty, the person who would always answer. Ethan smiled because that was easier than bleeding in front of him. Careful, he said. I might take half the house in the divorce. Noah laughed, warm and bright, and turned back to the stove. You would never. You love this couch too much. Ethan looked toward the living room, where the marriage certificate still waited on the coffee table, and thought of the hidden sketchbook in his apartment closet, full of all the versions of Noah he had never been brave enough to show. Yeah, he said softly. I guess I do. By noon, Willow Creek had accepted Ethan and Noah's accidental marriage with the speed and enthusiasm of a town that had been bored since the fall harvest parade. Mrs. Harper sent over a box of cinnamon rolls with white icing piped into uneven little hearts. Mr. Dalton from the hardware store left a voicemail offering them 10% off paint for the newlywed home project, then added that he had always known because Noah looked at Ethan the way men looked at reliable power tools, which somehow made the message worse. Noah played each voicemail on speaker while Ethan sat at the kitchen table pretending not to die inside. This town needs hobbies, Ethan said. This town has hobbies, Noah replied, scrolling through his phone. Unfortunately, one of them is us. The practical solution, according to Noah, was simple. They would wait until Monday, call the county clerk, explain the paperwork mistake, and laugh about it forever. But then Noah's mother called. Diane Bennett did not begin with hello. She began with a sound Ethan could only describe as emotional weather. Noah James Bennett, she said, her voice trembling with joy. If I had to find out from Facebook that you married Ethan, I am choosing to believe it is because you were too overwhelmed by happiness to use your thumbs. Noah closed his eyes. Ethan covered his mouth with one hand. Mom, Noah said carefully, it is a little complicated. Marriage always is, sweetheart. Put Ethan on. Ethan shook his head so quickly his hair fell into his eyes. Noah held the phone out anyway, wearing the helpless expression of a man who had built a roof in a thunderstorm but feared his own mother. Ethan took the phone. Hi, Diane. Her voice softened instantly. Hi, honey. Are you eating? Noah forgets vegetables unless someone supervises him. Ethan looked at Noah, who was currently eating a cinnamon roll over the sink. I am doing my best. Good. Dinner tonight. 6 o'clock. Your side of the family can come another time, but tonight I want my boys at my table. My boys. Ethan felt the words settle somewhere tender. He had not grown up with tables that welcomed him like that. In his father's house, affection had always arrived with instructions. Stand straighter. Speak less. Do something useful. The Bennetts, with their mismatched chairs and loud opinions and refrigerator covered in faded postcards, had been the first family where Ethan learned he could be quiet without disappearing. We will be there, he said before Noah could invent an excuse. Noah stared at him after the call ended. You realize this means my sister will make a toast. I survived your sister's karaoke birthday. I fear nothing. You feared several things that night. Reasonable things. By 5:30, Ethan was in Noah's passenger seat, wearing a navy sweater Diane had once said made his eyes look like a winter lake. Noah drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gearshift, close enough that Ethan could see the silver band on his finger. Noah had not taken it off. Ethan tried not to look at it too long. The Bennett house sat 15 minutes outside town, tucked between maple trees and a gravel driveway lined with pumpkins. Warm light glowed in every window. Before Ethan could open his door, Noah was already around the truck, pulling it open for him out of habit. "You do know I can operate a door," Ethan said. "I know many things. I ignore most of them." Inside, the house smelled like pot roast, rosemary, and apple pie. Diane hugged Ethan first, longer than usual, then held his face between her hands with misty eyes. Noah's father, Frank, clapped Noah on the shoulder and gave Ethan a quiet nod that somehow felt like a blessing. Noah's younger sister, Lily, appeared from the kitchen holding a wooden spoon like a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, love wins in the weirdest possible way." Noah groaned. Ethan laughed because everyone else did, because the room was too warm not to, because for one dangerous second it felt easy to pretend this was not pretending. Dinner was loud and soft at the same time. Lily asked who proposed. Frank asked if they needed help fixing the loose steps at Ethan's apartment. Diane kept refilling Ethan's plate and smiling whenever Noah reached past him for the salt. Halfway through the meal, Frank disappeared into the hallway and returned with a small blue velvet box. The conversation quieted. "These were my parents," he said, setting the box between them. "You do not have to use them. I just thought, until you get your own, maybe they should stay in the family." Ethan's heart slipped. Noah opened his mouth, probably to explain, probably to stop the moment before it became too real. But Ethan looked at the old rings nestled in faded satin, at the initials worn thin by decades of ordinary devotion, and something in him moved before caution could catch it. He touched the edge of the box gently. "They are beautiful," he said. Noah went still beside him. Across the table, Diane smiled through tears. Ethan knew he should have said no. He knew this was exactly the kind of hope that could ruin him. But when Noah looked down at the rings, he did not laugh. For the first time all day, he looked almost afraid of what the joke had become. By the time dessert arrived, Ethan had become painfully aware of every small thing Noah did without thinking. Noah pulled out his chair when they moved from the dining room to the living room. Noah handed him the slice of apple pie with the extra crisp edge because he knew Ethan liked that part best. Noah rested one arm along the back of the couch behind him while Lily told a dramatic story about accidentally dyeing her laundry pink in college. And even though Noah never touched him, the warmth of his arm hovered close enough to make Ethan forget how to breathe normally. None of it was new. That was the cruel part. Noah had always been like this, steady and kind in ways that could be mistaken for love if Ethan let himself get careless. The only difference now was the ring. The old silver band on Noah's finger caught the lamplight every time he reached for his glass, turning an ordinary hand into a promise Ethan had no right to believe in. "So," Lily said, leaning forward with the dangerous sparkle of a younger sister who had never met a boundary she respected, "who fell first?" The room went quiet for half a second, just long enough for Ethan's heart to stumble. Diane made a soft sound, half warning, half curiosity. Frank pretended to adjust the fire even though it did not need adjusting. Noah laughed, easy and bright, because laughing was the bridge he always built over deep water. "Probably Ethan," he said. "He is the dramatic one. He cries at insurance commercials." Everyone laughed. Ethan did too. He even managed to roll his eyes and say, "One commercial. It had a golden retriever and a veteran. I stand by my emotions." The room warmed again, conversation moving on like nothing had happened. But the joke lodged under Ethan's ribs with a dull little ache. Probably Ethan. He knew Noah had meant nothing by it. Noah did not know he had stepped on the truth with both feet. He did not know Ethan had fallen first at 19 when Noah gave him his jacket in the library, then again at 22 when Noah drove 6 hours to see his first gallery show, then again at 25 when Noah held his hand in a hospital waiting room after Diane's surgery and whispered that he hated being scared alone. Ethan had fallen so many times it no longer felt like falling. It felt like living with gravity. A few minutes later, he slipped out onto the back porch with the excuse of needing air. October wrapped around him at once, sharp and clean, smelling of damp leaves and wood smoke. The Bennett backyard sloped down toward a dark line of trees, and beyond them, somewhere out of sight, the lake held the moon in pieces. Ethan folded his arms, trying to press himself back together. The screen door creaked behind him. Of course Noah followed. He always followed. "Hey," Noah said softly. "You disappeared." Ethan looked out at the yard. "I am allowed to leave a room. Not without filing the proper paperwork. We are married now." The joke landed between them and did not bounce. Noah seemed to notice this time. His voice gentled. "Are you really okay?" Ethan wanted to say no. He wanted to ask why Noah could call him husband in front of everyone and still make it sound like a costume. He wanted to ask whether Noah understood what it did to him when he wore that ring. When he looked at Ethan across his parents' dinner table, like they had accidentally wandered into a life that fit too well. Instead, Ethan said, "It is just a lot." Noah stepped closer and shrugged off his flannel jacket, draping it over Ethan's shoulders before Ethan could refuse. The cotton was warm from his body and smelled faintly of cedar and laundry soap. "You are freezing. I did not ask for your jacket. You never do." There it was again. That terrible tenderness. Ethan tightened his hands around the edges of the jacket. "Noah." His name came out too quiet. Noah turned toward him, the porch light softening the angles of his face. "Yeah." For one dangerous second, the truth rose in Ethan like a tide. "Do not take care of me like this if you do not mean it. Do not make fake things feel safer than anything real I have ever had. Do not ask me to laugh while you hold my heart in your hands." But through the window, Ethan could see Diane smiling at something Frank had said, Lily sneaking another bite of pie, the blue velvet ring box still sitting on the coffee table like a small, patient witness. This family had given him warmth without asking for an explanation. Noah had given him years of belonging, even if he had never understood the cost. Ethan swallowed the confession before it could ruin the porch, the dinner, the fragile little dream of being wanted for one more night. "I am fine," he said. Noah studied him, unconvinced, then reached up and gently tugged the jacket closed at Ethan's chest. "You are a terrible liar, Miller." Ethan looked down at Noah's hands, at the ring shining there, and smiled because the alternative was worse. "And you are a terrible fake husband." Noah's mouth curved, but his eyes stayed strangely serious. Later that night, when they returned to Noah's house, Ethan changed in the bathroom and came out to find Noah spreading blankets on the living room floor. "I will take the floor," Noah said. "You get the couch." Heroic. "I contain multitudes." Ethan laughed softly, then turned away to remove his ring. He placed it carefully on the side table beside the couch, aligning it with the edge as if a crooked ring might break something in him. Across the room, Noah went still. Ethan did not see it. He did not see Noah look down at his own hand, thumb brushing the band he had not taken off all day. He did not see the confusion flicker across Noah's face when he realized that, for reasons he could not explain, the thought of removing it felt wrong. The next morning, Ethan woke before Noah and lay still beneath the quilt, listening to the soft rhythm of the house. Noah was asleep on the floor beside the couch, one arm thrown over his face, his blanket half kicked away, the silver ring still on his hand. Ethan saw it in the pale blue light before sunrise and felt something inside him twist. Noah had worn it through the night. Maybe he had forgotten. Maybe he had been too tired to notice. Maybe Ethan was doing what he always did, turning crumbs into feasts because his heart had been starving for years. He sat up quietly, slid his own ring back onto his finger for reasons he refused to examine, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. By 8, the house had filled with the strange domestic peace of two people who knew each other too well. Noah burned the toast, Ethan saved the eggs, and they argued for 7 full minutes about whether cranberry jam belonged on breakfast sandwiches. It was almost normal. That was the problem. Normal with Noah had always been dangerous because it felt like something he could survive on forever, even when it was not enough. At 10, Ethan walked back to his apartment to shower and change, promising to meet Noah later at the town bookstore, where Ethan had a scheduled conversation with Caleb Turner, the children's book editor visiting from Boston. Caleb had discovered Ethan's portfolio online 3 months earlier and had been gently encouraging him to pitch his first full-picture book, the one Ethan had kept hidden in sketches and half-written notes because believing in himself felt more frightening than failing. The bookstore sat on Main Street between Mrs. Harper's Bakery and the little post office, its windows crowded with paper leaves and staff recommendation cards. Caleb was already there when Ethan arrived, standing near the children's section with a canvas messenger bag over one shoulder and a stack of sample books in his hands. He was 29, with sandy hair, wireframe glasses, and the calm confidence of someone who listened before speaking. When he smiled at Ethan, it was direct and unguarded. "Ethan Miller," Caleb said, "the man who makes lonely bears look emotionally complex." Ethan laughed, surprised by how easy it felt. "That might be the nicest insult I have ever received." They sat at a small table by the window, drinking coffee from paper cups while Caleb turned through Ethan's sketches one by one. He did not rush. He noticed the details, the tiny red scarf on the bear, the crooked mailbox, the way the child in the story always stood near doorways before finally stepping outside. "This is not just cute," Caleb said, tapping one page gently. "It has a real heartbeat. Kids understand loneliness more than adults think they do." Ethan looked down, warmth rising in his face. "I was worried it was too quiet." "Quiet can be powerful," Caleb said, "especially when it is honest." Outside the window, Noah had stopped on the sidewalk with a paper bag from the bakery in one hand. He had come because he knew Ethan forgot to eat when he was nervous. He had come because that was what Noah did. But now he stood there watching Ethan smile at another man, watching Caleb lean closer over the sketchbook, watching Ethan look seen in a way that had nothing to do with old jokes or shared history. Something unfamiliar tightened in Noah's chest. It was not anger. It was not exactly fear. It was a sharp, childish discomfort that made him feel ridiculous because Ethan was allowed to have meetings. Ethan was allowed to have a life that did not orbit Noah's workshop, Noah's family dinners, Noah's inconvenient disasters. Still, Noah did not go inside. He stood there until Caleb said something that made Ethan laugh again, softer this time, and then Noah turned away with the paper bag still warm in his hand. That evening, Ethan found the bag hanging on his apartment doorknob. Inside were 2 blueberry muffins and a note in Noah's square, practical handwriting. "You get mean when you skip lunch." Ethan smiled before he could stop himself, then hated how quickly the smile came. He had just put the muffins on the counter when his phone buzzed. Noah's name lit up the screen. "So," Noah said when Ethan answered, too casual by half, "how was your fancy book date?" Ethan paused. "It was a meeting, right? With Caleb." "Yes, with Caleb." Noah was quiet for a beat. "He seems nice." Ethan leaned against the counter, suddenly tired. "He is." Another pause. "Do you like him?" The question came out light, but something underneath it was not light at all. Ethan closed his eyes. After all these years, Noah had no right to sound like that. No right to tug on a thread he had never been willing to name. "Why would it matter?" Ethan asked. Noah did not answer. Ethan could hear him breathing on the other end, could picture him standing in his kitchen or his workshop, thumb probably turning the ring without realizing it. For one wild second, Ethan almost said it. "Because I cannot keep being your almost. Because I cannot be your husband in public and your joke in private. Because I have loved you so quietly that you mistook it for friendship." But the words stopped at the back of his throat, old fear closing around them. If he said them, there would be no taking them back. There would be no couch, no pancakes, no Bennett dinners, no safe place beside Noah where he could pretend wanting less was the same as being happy. "It does not matter," Ethan said finally. His voice sounded calm, which felt like another kind of lie. "Good night, Noah." He ended the call before Noah could hear the silence break. By Monday morning, the world should have become simple again. Noah would call the county clerk, explain that 2 exhausted best friends had been swept into a charity event mistake, and the paper on the coffee table would become nothing more than a strange weekend souvenir. Ethan told himself this while brushing his teeth, while packing his sketchbook into his canvas bag, while staring at the ring he had placed beside his keys and trying to decide whether wearing it to the clerk's office would be funny or pathetic. In the end, he left it on the table. Then he came back 5 seconds later and slipped it into his coat pocket, because leaving it behind felt worse. At 10, Noah picked him up in the old blue truck, unusually quiet behind the wheel. He had shaved, combed his hair, and put on the dark green flannel Ethan once said made him look less like a lumberjack and more like a man who owned exactly one nice shirt. The compliment had been 3 years ago. Noah had remembered. "I called," Noah said as Ethan climbed in. "The clerk said we need to come in together sign a correction request, and wait for the judge to review it. Could take a few days. Ethan buckled his seatbelt. So we are still legally ridiculous. Noah smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Looks like it. The county office was 40 minutes away, past rolling fields, red barns, and long stretches of road lined with maples losing their leaves. They made small talk for the first 15 minutes, the careful kind, all weather and traffic, and whether Mrs. Harper's cinnamon rolls were getting too sweet. Then silence settled. Between them, not comfortable this time, but full of everything they were not saying. Ethan watched fence posts pass in steady rhythm and thought about Boston. Caleb had emailed the night before, offering him a 3-month residency slot with a small children's press starting in November. It was not a guarantee of publication, but it was close enough to a door that Ethan could not ignore it. He had not told Noah yet. He did not know how to say that he needed space from the one person who felt like home. At the clerk's office, a woman named Marcia with silver glasses and a cardigan covered in embroidered pumpkins looked over their paperwork, then glanced at them with the warm pity of someone who had seen every kind of human confusion. "You two are not the first people to misunderstand a ceremonial event," she said. Noah exhaled. "That is a relief. You are, however, the first to use a family heirloom ring during one." Ethan froze. Noah looked at him. Marcia tapped the photocopy of the event form. Judge Whitaker noted that the rings were provided by the couple, which helped classify the ceremony as intentional. Noah's brows pulled together. "Wait, no? I gave him the ring because my dad had it in his coat pocket from cleaning out old boxes for the donation table. I thought it was from the prop tray." Ethan turned toward him slowly. "You did not know?" "Of course I did not know." Noah's voice softened. "Ethan, I would not have done that to you on purpose." "To you." The words were kind, and somehow that made them worse. Marcia cleared her throat gently and gave them a new form. "Sign here. It will still need review." Outside, the air had turned colder. Noah leaned against the truck, holding the unsigned copy like it weighed more than paper. "I can make something for the rings," he said suddenly. Ethan blinked. "What? A box? Just until this is sorted, so they do not get lost." He looked embarrassed the moment he said it. "It is stupid." Ethan should have agreed. Instead, 2 days later, Noah showed up at his apartment with a small wooden ring box resting in his palm. It was made from pale maple, sanded smooth, with a tiny carving on the lid, a cabin beside a lake. Smoke curling from the chimney, 2 chairs on the porch. Ethan recognized it immediately. Years ago, they had found that abandoned lakeside cabin during a hike and joked about fixing it up someday. Noah had called it their retirement plan. Ethan had pretended not to hear the word "our." "You made this?" Ethan asked. Noah shrugged. "You keep the things people give you." The sentence slipped into Ethan's chest and opened something tender. He lifted the lid. Inside, the old ring lay on soft blue fabric. It looked painfully real there. Too real. Ethan stared at the careful corners, the carved cabin, the tiny porch chairs, and felt fear rise sharper than hope. "Why are you making fake things so carefully?" Noah's expression changed, as if the question had reached a place he did not know how to answer. "I do not know," he admitted. "I guess because it is yours." Ethan looked at him then, really looked, and saw confusion, warmth, and something unnamed flickering behind Noah's eyes. It would have been easy to step closer, easy to mistake uncertainty for courage. Instead, Ethan took a small piece of paper from his desk and wrote one sentence with a hand that barely shook. He folded it once, placed it inside the box beneath the ring, and closed the lid. Noah watched him. "What is that?" Ethan handed the box back. "Something you should only read when you are ready to stop joking." Noah did not open it in front of him. He just held the box with both hands, as carefully as if Ethan had finally given him the part of his heart he had been hiding all along. Noah did not open the box until midnight. He had carried it from Ethan's apartment to his truck, from the truck to his workshop, and from the workshop to the kitchen table, where it sat between a cold cup of coffee and a stack of unpaid invoices while the house grew quiet around him. For hours, he told himself he was giving Ethan space. That sounded noble. It sounded mature. It also sounded like hiding, and Noah was beginning to recognize the difference. Finally, with sawdust still on his jeans and the porch light humming outside, he lifted the lid. The ring rested where he had left it, silver against blue fabric. Beneath it, tucked carefully under the lining, was the folded piece of paper. Noah unfolded it slowly, already afraid of a sentence before he even knew what it said. Do not give me something that feels real if you need it to stay fake. The words were small, but they changed the shape of the room. Noah sat back as if Ethan had spoken them out loud. For the first time, he saw the weekend not as a ridiculous mistake with a funny story attached, but as a series of moments he had handled carelessly because he had trusted Ethan to absorb the impact. Husband, ring, family dinner, jacket on the porch, the wooden box. Every time Noah had made the fake thing beautiful, Ethan had been forced to decide whether to believe him or protect himself from him. Noah rubbed both hands over his face. Idiot, he whispered, but the word did not feel big enough. The next morning, he drove to Ethan's apartment with the box on the passenger seat and an apology rehearsed in 3 different versions. None of them survived when Ethan opened the door wearing a gray sweater, tired eyes, and the expression of someone who had already made a decision. Behind him, 2 cardboard boxes sat on the floor. His sketchbooks were stacked neatly beside his canvas bag. A Boston bus schedule was pinned beneath a magnet on the refrigerator. Noah looked at the boxes, then at Ethan. What is this? Ethan stepped aside because politeness was stitched into him too deeply, even now. Caleb offered me a residency with the press. 3 months. I leave Friday. The name landed wrong, sharp and unwelcome. Friday, Noah repeated. You were going to tell me when? Ethan closed the door. When I knew how to say it without making you feel responsible. Responsible for what? Noah asked, though part of him already knew. Ethan gave a small, sad laugh. That is the problem, Noah. You never think you are responsible for what you make people hope. The apology in Noah's throat tangled with fear. He set the wooden box on the counter. I read the note. Ethan's eyes flicked to it, then away. Then you understand. I understand that I hurt you. That is not the same thing. Noah stepped closer, then stopped himself because Ethan looked like a man standing at the edge of a bridge he had built by hand. Do you have to go because of him? The moment the words left his mouth, Noah knew they were wrong. Ethan's face changed, not with anger exactly, but with disappointment so quiet it was worse. Caleb is not the reason I am leaving. Noah swallowed. Then why? Ethan looked around the small apartment. The framed sketches, the chipped mug by the sink, the plant Noah had saved from near death twice. The life Ethan had made here, while always leaving room for Noah to walk in. Because I need to know who I am when I am not waiting for you to choose me by accident. Noah went still. The words did not say everything, but they opened a door both of them had spent years pretending was only a wall. Ethan. No, Ethan's voice was soft, but firm enough to stop him. Please do not make me explain it just so you can feel sorry for me. I do not feel sorry for you. Then what do you feel? Noah opened his mouth. Nothing came. The silence hurt more than a denial would have. Ethan nodded once, as if some final, private question had been answered. He crossed to the counter, opened the wooden box, and took out the ring. For a second, Noah thought he was going to put it on. Instead, Ethan placed it in Noah's palm and gently closed his fingers around it. You should keep this, Ethan said. It belongs to a family that knows what forever means. Noah's eyes burned. Ethan, wait. But Ethan stepped back, drawing a line that no courthouse paper had ever truly crossed. It was fake for you, he said. That was the whole problem. Then he opened the door, not to throw Noah out, but to save them both from the next thing Noah might say without understanding it. Noah walked back to his truck with the ring in his hand and the box tucked under his arm. Only when he reached home did he open it again, searching for the note because pain had made him desperate for proof. His thumb caught on a loose edge in the lining. Beneath the blue fabric, hidden flat against the wood, was an old photograph. He pulled it free carefully. In the picture, they were 21. Asleep on Ethan's apartment couch after finals, Noah's head tipped back. Ethan curled beside him with one hand resting inches from Noah's. On the back, in Ethan's handwriting, were 9 words that made Noah sit down before his knees forgot how to hold him. The first time I knew I was in trouble. Noah spent the next day trying to solve his feelings the way he solved problems in the workshop, by taking them apart and laying every piece where he could see it. The photograph stayed on his kitchen table, beside the ring, the wooden box, and the note Ethan had left behind. For small objects, none of them heavy, yet together they made the house feel impossible to stand in. He picked up the photo, so many times the edges began to soften under his thumb. 21-year-old Ethan looked exhausted in it, his hair falling over his eyes, His body curled toward Noah even in sleep. Noah remembered that night vaguely. Finals week. Broken heater. Too much cheap pizza. Ethan insisting he was fine while his hands shook from too much coffee. Noah had thrown a blanket over both of them and fallen asleep mid-sentence. To Noah, it had been a funny memory. To Ethan, it had been the first warning sign of heartbreak. That difference hurt more than Noah expected. By late afternoon, he drove to his parents' house because he could not trust himself to call Ethan and say another half-formed thing that would only make the wound deeper. Diane found him on the back steps, coat unzipped, staring at the trees like they might explain him. She sat beside him without asking permission, handing him a mug of hot cider. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then she said, "You look exactly like your father did the week before he proposed." Terrified and stubborn, Noah let out a humorless laugh. "I do not think this is that." "No." Diane looked at the ring in his hand. "Then what is it?" Noah turned the band slowly. "I thought we were just joking. I thought Ethan knew that." "Ethan knows how to laugh when something hurts," she said gently. "That is not the same as being unhurt." The words landed with quiet force. Noah closed his eyes. "How long do you think he has felt this way?" Diane did not answer. Immediately, that silence was answer enough. "Mom," she sighed, soft and sad. "Long enough that I stopped hoping you would notice quickly and started hoping you would notice kindly." Noah's throat tightened. "Why did nobody tell me?" "Because it was not ours to tell. And because love is not a group project, sweetheart." He looked down at the ring until it blurred. Diane reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out an old phone, one of those small cracked screen models Noah had forgotten still existed. "Frank found this in a box from your college apartment. We were going to ask if you wanted it before we recycled it. I charged it last night because I am nosy and sentimental." Despite everything, Noah almost smiled. "That sounds like you. There are old photos on it. A few messages. Maybe nothing important." She placed it in his palm. "But sometimes the past keeps better records than we do." That night, Noah sat alone in his truck outside the closed workshop, the old phone glowing weakly in his hands. Most of it was useless. Blurry pictures of furniture projects, a video of Lily singing off-key at Thanksgiving, a dozen texts about rent and grocery money. Then he found the voicemail folder. One message had no name attached, only Ethan's number and a date from 6 years ago. A rainy March night Noah barely remembered except that he had broken up with a woman named Claire and then spent 3 hours on Ethan's couch pretending he was relieved. Noah pressed play. Static crackled first. Then Ethan's voice came through, younger, tired, and unguarded in a way Noah had almost never heard. "Hey, I know you are asleep. Or maybe you are not. You do that thing where you say you are fine and then stare at the ceiling like it personally offended you." A faint laugh, then a long breath. "I just wanted to say I am glad you came over tonight. Not because you were sad. I hate that you were sad. But because when you are here, the apartment feels less like a place I rent and more like somewhere I am allowed to exist." Noah stopped breathing. Ethan continued, softer now. "I know you will never hear this the way I mean it. That is okay. I am not asking you to. I just hope one day someone loves you quietly enough that you finally feel safe. You deserve that, Noah. Even when you are impossible. Especially then." The message ended with a click. Outside the windshield, the town was wrapped in early winter dark, warm lights glowing in shop windows, the bakery sign swinging gently in the wind. Noah sat perfectly still, the phone pressed against his ear long after the voicemail had finished. He had heard Ethan say kind things before. He had built a whole life on Ethan's kindness without ever asking what it cost him. But this was different. This was not a crush hidden in a photograph or a sentence folded under a ring. This was Ethan loving him on an ordinary Tuesday, asking for nothing, offering safety to the person who had never realized he had been standing inside it for years. Noah covered his face with one hand and cried, quietly at first, then with the helpless honesty of someone finally arriving too late to a room that had always been open. When he went back inside his parents' house near midnight, Diane was still awake at the kitchen table. She did not ask if he was okay. She only looked at his face and waited. Noah set the old phone, the ring, and the photograph on the table. His voice shook when he finally spoke. "I do not think I was pretending." Diane reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Then do not make him carry the truth alone anymore." Friday came with a sky the color of folded paper and a wind cold enough to make Main Street look lonelier than it was. Ethan stood outside the small bus station with one suitcase, one canvas bag of sketchbooks, and a paper cup of coffee growing cold between his hands. The bus to Boston would take a little over 3 hours if the roads stayed clear. 3 hours was not far. It was not even dramatic. People traveled farther for cheaper groceries and better doctors. But as Ethan watched the driver load luggage beneath the bus, it felt like he was measuring the distance between the life he had survived and the life he might finally choose for himself. He had not slept much. His apartment looked strange now, half empty and echoing, the walls bare where his sketches had been. Caleb had texted that the studio would have a desk ready by Monday. Diane had sent a message saying she had packed snacks in the side pocket of his suitcase because artists could not live on nerves and gas station coffee. Noah had not called. Ethan told himself that was kinder. If Noah came with apologies but not certainty, Ethan did not know whether he would be strong enough to leave. He was reaching for his ticket when he heard hurried footsteps on the pavement. He turned, and there was Noah, breathless in his dark green flannel, hair wind-tossed, cheeks red from the cold, holding the wooden ring box in both hands like something fragile enough to change the weather. For one impossible second, neither of them spoke. The town moved around them in soft morning pieces, a car door closing, a dog barking near the post office, the low rumble of the waiting bus. Noah stopped a few feet away, close enough for Ethan to see that his eyes were tired, but clear. "I am not here to stop you," Noah said. Ethan's fingers tightened around the coffee cup. "Good." Noah nodded as if he deserved the edge in Ethan's voice. "You should go to Boston. You should make the book. You should sit in a room full of people who know how good you are without needing 12 years and a paperwork mistake to figure it out." Ethan looked away because that was almost harder to hear than a confession. "Then why are you here?" Noah opened the wooden box. Inside were the old ring, the photograph, the folded note, and a new piece of paper covered in Noah's careful handwriting. "Because I do not want the last thing I gave you to be confusion." Ethan stared at the box. "Noah, please, just this once, let me say it badly instead of not saying it at all." Ethan's throat tightened, but he did not walk away. Noah took that as permission, or maybe as mercy. "I thought love was supposed to announce itself like lightning," Noah said. "I thought it was supposed to look the way it looked in movies, big and obvious and easy to label. So when it felt like coffee in my kitchen and your shoes by my door, and knowing you hate onions without checking, I called it friendship because that was the safest word I knew." His voice shook, but he kept going. "I married you as a joke because I was too much of a coward to ask why the joke made me happy. And when you took it seriously, I laughed because I was scared of what it meant that some part of me wanted it to be serious too." Ethan's eyes burned. He hated that the words reached him. He hated that they were late and still beautiful. "Do you love me?" he asked quietly. "Or do you just love being loved by me?" Noah closed his eyes for a moment, as if the question had found the exact place he was most afraid to touch. When he opened them, there was no easy answer in his face, only honesty. "I am still learning the difference," he said. "But I know this. When I listened to your voicemail, I realized I have felt safe for years because you were there. I know I want to become someone who makes you feel that safe too. I know I do not want to learn how to love anyone else while pretending I did not already start with you." The bus driver called for boarding. Ethan looked toward the open door, then back at Noah. His heart was not a door that could simply swing open because Noah had finally found the handle. There were years inside it. Hope, hurt, laughter, all the times he had swallowed the truth to keep a friendship alive. "I am still going," Ethan said. Noah nodded immediately. "I know. I need to go. I know. And if this is real, it cannot only be real because I am leaving." Noah took the new paper from the box and held it out. "That is why I wrote this down. Not to trap you. Not to fix everything today. Just so you have proof that I can be brave when there is no audience." Ethan took the paper with trembling fingers. It was not a grand speech. It was a promise in plain language. Noah had written that he would call before visiting, that he would ask instead of assume, that he would not use humor to hide from Ethan's pain, that he would wait without making waiting Ethan's burden. And at the bottom, one sentence made Ethan press his lips together before emotion could break through. "I choose you on purpose, even if you need time to believe me." The driver called again. Ethan folded the paper carefully and placed it inside his coat, over his heart. Then he stepped closer, close enough that Noah stopped breathing. Ethan touched the edge of the wooden box, then the ring inside it. "Keep it safe," he said, "until I know what I want to do with it." Noah's smile was small, tearful, and full of hope. "I can do that." Ethan boarded the bus. He did not look back until he reached his seat by the window. Noah was still there on the sidewalk, one hand raised, the wooden box held against his chest. 3 months later, snow covered the roof of the old lakeside cabin they had once joked about fixing. Ethan's first picture book had found a publisher. Noah's community workshop had opened with 8 donated benches and more teenagers than chairs. They were not perfect. They still had awkward conversations, old fears, and days when love required patience instead of poetry. But on a quiet Sunday morning, with the lake frozen silver beyond the porch, Ethan stood beside Noah in the little cabin that smelled of fresh paint and cedar. There was no judge, no town, no applause. Just 2 men, 2 rings, and a sheet of vows they had written together. Noah reached for Ethan's hand, not as a joke, not by accident, but with the careful certainty of someone who finally understood the weight of what he was holding. Ethan let him take it. And this time, when Noah called him husband, nobody laughed. They only smiled.